For third trimester, we're going to be back doing in-person learning. And since we haven't been in a classroom together for a while, we're going to explain some of the rules and how it's going to go. And it's going to look different than normal school. So we'll highlight some of those differences in this presentation. First, let's address the fact that COVID is still very much present in society. So it's extremely important that you do not come to school if you're experiencing any symptoms related to COVID or any other communicable illness. So if you have a fever, if you have difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell, muscle pain, nausea, diarrhea or vomiting, chills, a cough, runny nose or congestion, a sore throat, a headache, or fatigue, definitely stay home. You do not need to come to school. All of your schoolwork is on Canvas, and you can always get everything done from home. When you're in the school building or on school grounds, and especially in our classroom, you must cover your nose and mouth at all times. It's extremely important that your mask covers both openings on your face so that you don't spread respiratory droplets with other people. You also need to remain 6 feet from adults at all times in the building, and then 3 feet from other students if possible. In our classroom, it's going to be kind of crowded because some of the classes are kind of large, and so you might share a desk with somebody. Do the best you can to stay as far away from other people as possible as the space allows. When you come to school every day, it is critical that you bring your Chromebook and a charger. That's because you'll be doing all of your schoolwork on your Chromebook. You will also need to have headphones or earbuds along with that because much of what we present will be through Canvas. Because we're going to have masks and face shields on all the time, we might be very difficult to hear. So you probably will get a lot of your instruction through videos that are located in Canvas. It's also extremely important to bring warm clothing to school, and that's because we might go outside if the weather is okay, but the windows will be open all day, and so we need fresh air to help keep the room as a safer environment. It's gonna get cold because it's March. When you're in the classroom, there is absolutely no eating or drinking at all, and that's because that way you can keep your mask on at all times. There will be breakfast served at school, there will be lunch served at school, but you absolutely may not eat or drink when you're in the classroom. We also get mice, and so not eating and drinking in the classroom is a great way to prevent mice from taking up residence in our classroom too. It's also really important that you don't walk around. If you need to get up to do something in class, you're going to have to ask permission first. We're not saying that you can't leave the room to use the hallway for bathrooms or whatever, but you do have to ask permission. So do not walk around without permission. You also cannot switch seats. When you have an assigned seat, you have to stay there. And that's because in the event of a COVID outbreak in our classroom, we have to be able to contact trace the people who sit near the person who ends up with an infection. So you have to stay in your same seat all the time unless your teachers change the seating chart. You also can't go by the windows in the classroom because that's where the teachers will be seated, and you have to stay 6 feet from teachers at all times. When you come to class, there are some optional items you can bring. If you want to take notes with a paper and pencil, that's totally fine. We can't provide it for you, but we can let you bring it to school if you keep it in your backpack and take it home at night. So if you want to take notes or write things down on paper, just bring your own notebook and a pencil or a pen, and that's totally great. You might also want to bring a lawn chair in case we go outside to work when the weather gets a little bit nicer, because breathing outside is much more comfortable in a mask than indoors sometimes, and it's nice to get out into the sun. So feel free to bring a lawn chair. You can keep it in my classroom if you put your name on it. If you need to get up to go someplace in the room, you need to ask, but there's a procedure. So first you need to ask with a chat in the message board that we have that's going to be open during class in a Google Meet. Then when Ms. Heigerler or I sees that, we're able to give you permission. If you need to go to the bathroom or your locker or anything, please limit your trips in the hallway to 5 minutes or less, just because that way anyone who needs to go because they need to use the bathroom or go to their locker or whatever is also able to go. We'll be able to allow about 2 people out of the room at a time, so it's just really important that you keep your visits to the hallway prompt so that everybody has a chance if they need to. We're also going to have the doors labeled, one for entering the classroom and one for exiting, with one direction traffic through the room. So it's important that you use the correct door for entering the room and then the other door for leaving the room. If at any point during class you don't feel well, go to the nurse immediately. If you feel okay enough to wait for us to write you a pass, then we will do that. If you think you're going to throw up or something else, just wave at us frantically. We'll understand that means you need to go to the nurse and run out of the room. But seriously, anything that you don't, if you have a sore throat, if you have a cough, any of those things are a great reason to go to the nurse. We'll write you a pass if you have time to wait for that. But obviously, if you're going to puke or something and you need to make it to a toilet, you can just go. When we have class every day, go ahead and check into the hub so that you have attendance logged for the school. We'll also be taking an in-person attendance for contact tracing purposes because we need to know who is in school in case there ends up being a COVID outbreak. You'll also want to log into the sync meet that we have every day, and that's just because that's where you'll be able to answer or ask questions and get our attention. Because we're so far away from all of you, because we have to stay 6 feet away, and we have a face shield and a mask on, it might be difficult to ask us questions and hear an answer in person, even though we're in the same room. So go ahead and ask your question first in the chat, and then we can address from there whether or not it's appropriate for you to stand up and come to the back of the room. We also would really like you to complete at least one assignment per day, and that way you won't get behind. You'll be totally caught up and you will pass the class easily. Like we said before, if you've got questions, we're happy to answer questions. Ask your question first via the chat feature in Gmail or use your Google Meet that's open during class. And if you want to ask that question in person, make sure that you request to get up from your seat first and then wait for permission to approach the teacher. And then you can walk to the teacher desk. There's going to be a box that it denotes that you're 6 feet away from the teacher. You can stand there, and that way you're close enough to hopefully hear, far enough away to keep everybody safe. And then just make sure that since you have a mask on, you're speaking loudly and clearly so that we can hear your question. To be successful in class, one of the first things you should do every day is check Canvas, because this is how you'll know what assignments you need to do that week. The Canvas course is going to look the same as it has all year. Every single assignment that you get will be in Canvas, and it will be a lot of the same types of assignments. So always check Canvas, look at the week at a glance, because that will help you to plan your schoolwork schedule for the week. If you're coming in person, you should be able to get every daily assignment done in class. If you're sitting at home, distance learning, same thing. You should be able to get your work done in less than half an hour most days. So it should not be a super onerous task to get one assignment done per day. And that's the goal. If you get one assignment done per day, you won't get behind. And then make sure that you ask questions if there's things you don't understand. When you ask a question, you can again ask it in the chat, you can send us an email, or you can ask for permission to stand up, and then you can come to the teacher's desk and ask a question in person. The daily schedule looks like this. You'll have about 40 minutes in each class. The school day starts at 7:50. And then the big difference from a normal school year that we've had in the past is that during fifth hour, when we have lunch, there's a lot more time in fifth hour than the rest of your classes. So you're going to be in your fifth hour for 90 minutes, and then you're also going to have a half hour lunch. So make sure that you bring all of your schoolwork, which is probably all on your Chromebook, but make sure you have lots to do because that fifth hour class is going to be extremely long because it combines class with a study hall. So make sure that you are ready to kill a lot of time with your fifth hour teacher. And then sixth hour ends at 1:35, and then buses depart at 1:45. So at the end of the school day, you'll release at 1:40 or 1:35. You have 10 minutes to get your bus, and then buses depart at 1:45. So that's really important to know. Wednesdays and Thursdays will be block days. So here your classes are a little bit longer. They're about 74 minutes. And then they're going to end at 11:40, and then lunch is at 11:40. Buses will actually take people home at 11:50, and you can eat lunch at your house because you'll bring it with you. If you're staying because you have support, like you've got a teacher who's helping you with something or something like that, Then you'll stay at school until 2:30 and then take the bus home at 2:37. So most of you will be in school on Wednesday and Thursday from 7:50 in the morning until 11:50 when the buses leave. And then if you're staying after that time for additional help, then you'll be at school until 2:30. If you are exposed to COVID, you're going to review the guidelines that are hyperlinked there in green for school. That was developed by Bloomington Public Schools, and so that procedure is the same across Bloomington for all people. If you're exposed to COVID or diagnosed with COVID, there are some things you need to do in order to make sure that you don't spread COVID more through the school. But kind of this take-home idea, if you have symptoms, is to stay home for 14 days, and then you can come back to school if you have a negative COVID test and no symptoms for 2 days. If someone in your house has COVID, that means you've been exposed, so don't come to school if someone in your house has COVID. Get a COVID test after you have been around them for a week, because that's about how long it takes for the virus to incubate. And stay home and distance learn until you have a negative test and don't have any COVID symptoms. And if you are exposed to COVID outside of your home, again, don't come to school. Get a COVID test 7 days after your known exposure and stay home and do distance learning until you have a negative test and no symptoms. So basically, if you have COVID or have been exposed to COVID, stay home until you have a negative COVID test or no symptoms for 2 full days. It's really important that you do not come to school sick. And if you've been exposed to COVID, even if you feel okay, you have to really get a negative test first. That's the wisest thing to do. If you've got questions and you want specifics, you need to call the nurse at school, and that number is provided here. She has a lot more knowledge about this process than the teachers do, because the nurses were involved in crafting this response. So if you have questions for me about what to do if you're exposed to COVID, I will tell you to go ask the nurse, because she's the one with the most knowledge. But any symptoms that you have, always stay home first and then call the nurse. Never come to school if you think you don't feel good, right? Always, always, always stay home and do distance learning that day. Call the nurse and then find out what to do next. If you have additional questions, you can look at the Kennedy High School safety guidelines. Those were shared with you in an email, I believe, from school administration. It's also hyperlinked here. So if you need to check the safety guidelines, you can click on that. And that goes through safety guidelines in more than just our classroom. It goes through lunch and all those sort of different things. And then if you feel like you would like to take a COVID test because you think you've been exposed or you have symptoms, you can either go to a test site or order a test that comes to your house. Those are saliva tests, so you just have to spit into a test tube and then send your sample into a lab. It's pretty easy. These are not the tests. The at-home test is not the one where you have to have the nasal swab to get a sample. So make sure that if you're exposed to COVID, you don't come to school, and that you get a COVID test is a really good idea. And if you have symptoms for any illness, don't come to school. And if you don't know when you should come back to school, you can call the nurse and she will help you make that decision.